Anyway, we're going to be joined in the next hour. I don't think we're going to get any news at 9, by the way, but we'll do the weather. And we're going to be joined in the next hour by Pete Johnson, a member of the Moontrekkers. We're going to be going back in time to the misty world of beat instrumentals and the 60s when everyone was making their way, and even the unusual experience of recording for the legendary Joe Meek. All that in the next hour, but let's dive in. Pete Johnson. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Robbie.
Welcome to our studios on this rather snowy night.
Yes, didn't think it was going to get here, but we got there in the end.
You know, we've navigated around most of Nebworth Park.
Well, I think we found most of it, yeah.
And other conditions pretty
Yes,
nasty.
it's coming down heavier all the time. I think we're going to have to have a snowplow to get us out of here tonight.
Well, actually, the neighbour has a tractor next door. So
that's handy.
You'd be amazed at what we can get our hands on. So, a couple of real rock and rollers.
Well, goes back to my youth.
Yeah.
The sort of music I grew up on back in the late 50s. And
that must have been a bit of a contrast, because everything was pretty genteel till they appeared.
Well, yeah, once, Rock Around the Clock came out, the film and everything. I remember going and seeing all those old rock and roll films. Don't Knock the Rock,
If it's
Disc
not a
Jockey
rude
Jamboree
question,
and all those, yeah.
Pete, what age were you when those films came out?
I probably would have been about 12, 13 or something like that, I suppose.
My goodness. So you were very
14
impressionable.
maybe.
How did you... I mean, that must have been quite something.
Well, it was, because it was just music, before then, everything was like Frank Sinatra, things like that, which I think are great now, but at the time, it was square, wasn't it? They used to call it in those days, and now, when that music came out, you couldn't stop rocking, could you? It was going, and it was just brilliant seeing it, and going to see all those old rock and roll films and seeing people like Little Richard and Fats Domino and all the other stars at the time, you thought, Christ, these people are brilliant,
What part of the world were you growing up in?
North London, Hornsey, Crouch End, yeah.
Okay. Glamorous area.
Oh, glamorous area, yeah.
But I guess in the capital, so when these legendary American stars that I guess you only saw them on the silver screen.
No, I went to, there was the old Finsbury Park Empire.
Right.
They used
Is
to
that
have,
what became the Rainbow?
No, that was originally the Astoria.
Oh, right.
Then that became the Rainbow. But before, when it was still a cinema, all the concerts used to be on at the Finsbury Park Astoria. Empire, rather.
Finsbury Park Empire.
Yeah, and I
Sounds
saw people like Lonnie Donegan, I remember seeing there.
Yeah.
Because he was one of my first loves, of music. Because I remember buying one of his records, probably one of the first records I bought, Lonnie Donegan. And then people like I saw Eddie Cochran on the tour when he died. He was on there, and Gene Vincent as well.
So you saw him?
Yeah, I actually saw Eddie
Wow.
Cochran, which
Now, he influenced an entire generation of
he
guitar
was
players.
brilliant. He was brilliant. I mean, that's one of the songs I should have put in tonight, but
Well,
one of the
couldn't
ones
fit
I
everybody
keep.
So what instrument did you pick up first?
Well, I first started messing about with a little 6-string acoustic guitar,
Right.
and then Gary Leopold, who was the lead guitarist, we used to both go to school together,
Right.
Crouch End Secondary Modern. And he came up to me in the playground one day and said, do you want to play the bass? I'm going to form a group. So I said, well, I never played the bass. So he said, I'll show you, because he'd been having lessons and everything.
Right.
So he was really good even then. And that's how it started from there. Bought myself a little cheap bass. And we got a drummer, a rhythm guitar player, Jimmy and Tony. And then we got a singer as well, Bob Farrant. And we became Bob Farrant and the Raiders.
Oh. What year would that have been, Pete?
That would have been about 1960, I suppose.
1960.
Yeah.
Bob Farron and the Raiders.
Yeah, that was our original.
Taking North London
Yeah.
by storm.
Well, not exactly by storm. Mostly youth clubs and your local dances
and
in those days.
did you leave school at 15 or
Yes,
16?
yeah, 15 I left school,
15.
yeah.
What did your parents think of that? Were they, because a lot of the stories are the parents weren't very pleased about people picking up guitars.
No, they were very supportive. Yeah,
Yeah?
I didn't have any problem. No, I used to shut myself away in the front room with a guitar and try to play it.
Now you've chosen a track next by which I think is probably the greatest British instrumental record ever.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely.
Well, they were one of the biggest influences on us all, I think, and I think every group at the time wanted to be them, which is obviously the Shadows, and everyone wanted to be Hank Marvin and have a red Fender Stratocaster.
And can you remember the first time you heard this record?
Yeah, I was at school when this came on, and I remember, I think it was the last day of term, and the teachers let us bring records in to play, and this was one of the records I brought in.
Oh, fantastic. I think we better hear it. Still gives me goose pimples, that record. Isn't that wonderful? Shadows and Apache, chosen by our special guest here on the Jukebox Driver. Pete Johnson is in the interviewee's chair, and we'll be talking with Pete a bit more in just a moment. Mr. Pete Johnson. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Robbie.
So you were a rock and roller through and through.
Well, that was one of that record there was one of the first songs that we actually learnt to play, I think, if I remember rightly, when we first started. And I always remember doing that one with Bob Farron, who was our singer at that time.
So, Bob, you were with Bob Farron for what? How long?
Oh, it's hard to say now. It's so long ago, you can't. It probably wasn't that long, but it seemed a long while at the time. But he was signed up by Lionel Bart.
Because he used to of Oliver fame.
Yes, in fact, Lionel Bart came up to see us rehearse once.
Well, he was involved with Tommy Steele, wasn't he?
That's right. Yes, and he signed him up, changed his name to Bobby Shafto.
Oh, he must have been managed by Larry Parnes in that case.
I'm not sure who managed him, but anyway, he had a couple of records out written by Lionel Bart.
Right.
And that's how we got involved with Rod Stewart after that.
Rod Stewart. Tell us more. This must have been a very young Rod Stewart.
Oh, it was a young Rod Stewart, yeah.
Was he a precocious young man?
No, he was same as the rest of us, really. He was a bit more flamboyant, the way he used to dress and everything, Right. He used to sort of design his own clothes and things like that.
So he became your...
Well, yeah, because Bob left and we didn't have a singer, and Tony, our drummer, he said, well, there's a bloke I work with, they were apprentice carpenters, I think they were.
He was an apprentice?
Yeah, or picture frame makers or something like that they were. He says, a bloke at work, he's got a great voice, sings just like Eddie Cochran. So he said, well, that sounds all right, so bring him along. And heard him sing, we thought, great, he's got a great voice. And that was it. But we thought, well, you had to have a special name in those days. You had to have Billy Fury or Rob Storm or something like that, So we said, what's your name? It's Rod Stewart. I thought, well, that sounds a good name. So Gary said, well, why don't we spell it different? We'll spell it Stuarte. So he became Rod Stewarty. And because in the meantime, we'd had to change our name because there was an American group out called the Paul Revere and the Raiders.
Yes.
So that was when we changed our name to the Moontrekkers. So we became...
And who came up with that, Moontrekkers?
That was Gary. I don't know where it came from, but he came up with it. We thought, well, it sounds different. And that's stuck ever since.
Yeah, it certainly has. And Rod Stewart, how long was he with you?
Oh, I don't know, a year or so, I suppose, a year or two. It's hard to say. Then he got fed up with, he got bored, decided to go off busking around France.
Right. And were you making a reasonable living, kicking around?
Oh, we weren't making a living. We were only amateurs, We all had daytime jobs at the time.
And what were you doing at that time?
Oh, we used to work at the Daily Express up in London, yeah. Right. I was started off there as a messenger boy. Ended up in the accounts department.
So how many gigs a week were you playing typically?
In those days, not many, maybe 2, 3, maybe. And only odd local gigs. We weren't sort of national or anything like that.
Right.
I did more with another band I joined after I left the Moontrekkers.
Okay, well, we'll come to that. Now, you've chosen a track by Gene Vincent to play.
Another one, say...
And you say
Heroes.
You saw him on that.
I saw him, I saw him. He as what I remember Eddie Cock. I don't think he was billed to come on, but he came in out of the audience. I remember, I think he was singing from the sort of front of the stage, if I remember rightly. I think he just happened to turn, he was there, because they were all on the tour together, weren't they? Because I think that was when Eddie Cochran got killed on that tour.
I think
he
it
was in the car with Gene Vincent, wasn't he?
Digressing slightly, we're seeing famous people on tour. Did you ever get the chance to see Buddy Holly?
No, I never did see him.
Because he only played a handful of gigs
Yeah,
in the UK,
yeah.
and yet his impact was enormous.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there had ever been a Beatles if it wasn't
No.
for him. Fantastic. If there was any one gig you could go back and see again, what do you think it would be?
Hard to say.
Because you've seen some absolute legends.
Played with the Rolling Stones once when I joined another band after the Moontrekkers called the Aristocats.
Right.
And we did support the Stones once.
Oh.
That was good.
Wow.
And I've seen the Animals. They were brilliant. People like that, you know.
Yes.
And I used to go and see a lot of the bands in those days, like Spencer Davis Group, people like that. And
In their heyday, too,
yeah,
you were saying.
yeah.
All right, well, let's have that Gene Vincent track, and then we'll talk about how you came into the involvement with Joe Meek.
Well, Bebop-a-lula, she's my baby. Bebop-a-lula, she's my baby, my baby.
Bebop-a-lula, Gene Vincent, chosen by my special guest, Pete Johnson, and he's gigging with a band now called the Moontrekkers, and we're in the early 60s, and somewhere along on this journey, you get involved with independent record producer Joe Meek. How did that come about?
Well, it came about because Ron Winskiller, who was acting as our manager at the time, he managed to get hold of Joe Meek and brought him along to see us rehearse. And he heard this, the song Night of the Vampire, which Gary had written,
Right.
and he liked it. And he said, and then he invited us down to the studio to try it out there, which we did.
So this would have been what, 63?
60. Well, it came, 61 that would have been.
Mm-hmm.
The record came out in September 61,
Right.
so must have been earlier that
so
year.
this wouldn't have been the Holloway Road studio?
Yeah.
Would it? Or it was,
Oh, yeah,
it
the
was
original,
Holloway.
yeah.
So you went through that sort of handbag and
through
leather goods shop
Shenton's leather shop, yeah.
and
Up the stairs. Well, you've been there, so you know
Yeah.
what it looks like, don't you? Yeah, so you go up the flight of
what were
stairs.
your impressions? Because, this hotshot producer has agreed to meet you. You think, wow, we're going to record a record. And
Well, it's nothing like any recording studio you've ever imagined, because it's just like someone's front room. I mean, it's not much bigger than this room we're in now. The front room, I mean, if you've been out, and then it was all soundproofed up with like egg boxes and things like that on the walls. All the windows were blanked out. There was no big glass panel, which you expect when you see them on the television and things like that, with big panels of switches.
Right.
He was just in the back room with all his equipment, complete mess, tape recorders, boxes and things all over the place. The wires just came through round the door. And he just, when he wanted us to do a take, he just to poke his head round the door, say, OK, boys, take it from the top and bash on the door, and that was it.
And what were your impressions of Joe Meek himself?
Yeah, we was, I know he's got this reputation of being fiery and blowing his top, but he was pretty good with us, really. I don't remember us having any major rows, but he was a perfectionist.
Right.
And he made us keep coming back. We went up there several weeks before we actually
So you had
recorded
several
it.
goes. So this.
Yeah, well, he kept, going through it till he was satisfied with it,
So this is take XX.
Oh, yeah, come, he used to go up there in the evening, probably on a Wednesday or something like that. Come up there and we'd spend a couple of hours up there. Then he'd say, well, look, come back next week, we'll have another go.
And you were still working at the Daily Express?
Yeah.
while all this is going on.
Yeah, we were all still working at the
So
time.
it really must have seen an unreal world in comparison with the day job.
Well, yeah, I suppose it was really, but it didn't seem glamorous or anything, you should say, because it was just, it wasn't no big hot,
Just a bit of fun.
shot studio like you'd expect to find, nowadays, or even in those days probably. But,
And then the record finally appears.
well, it finally
what
appears.
What did you think when you first put the vinyl on?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you see, you get the record in your hand, the parlophone label and everything, I think, Christ, that's good. We've done it. But of course, promptly the BBC banned it, which is absolutely...
Why did they ban it?
Well, they reckon it was too frightening. Can you believe that? I mean, they have played it. They do play it nowadays. They
Right,
have heard it a few times on there the last few years, but those days they wouldn't play it. So,
You must have been pleased as punch, though. You know, hey, Mum, Dad, look, I'm on a record.
oh yeah,
Parlophone.
yeah.
Well, we
Oh,
better,
yeah, it
I think
was,
we better have
you know,
a listen.
Well, this is it because we thought it was going to, do well. It did do well for a while. It Luxembourg were the only station that played it. You know, we didn't have it was before the days of the Pirates as well. So, but it sold well at first. It sold right out. The first presses sold out, but then EMI's record company pressing plant went on strike. So it ran out. The first presses had run out, and they couldn't get no more in the shops. It reached number 50 for 1 week, and then by then the time it's back on the shelves again, the interest had gone, unfortunately.
No wonder the BBC banned it. It is still very frightening. Night of the Vampire. There's the Moontrekkers. According to the official Record Collector's Guide, worth £20 in mint condition. We'll have more with Pete Johnson in just a moment. Pete Johnson of the Moontrekkers is sitting right near me, and he played bass on that track, Hitachi, and the one we played just before, Night of the Vampire. And did it get easier working with Joe after the first single? You know, because you had a minor hit, so he should have been.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I suppose it was really, but you know, we just got used to each other, and he was pretty good with us. He didn't really blow any tantrums or anything like
and
he's famous for.
were you just recording with him as the Moontrekkers, or was he pulling you in on other sessions?
No, we only recorded as the Moontrekkers, but he used to use the Outlaws on a lot of his sessions as backing musicians, and I think later on he used the Tornadoes a lot as well.
Yeah, he did.
You know, people like Johnny Lake and things like that. But.
And after that, the success of that record, did you give up the day job, or?
No, no, we didn't go professional. Well, they did. I left the band. What happened? They were going to go to Germany, and as I was only 15 at the time, I needed my parents' permission, and they said no.
Oh.
And that's when I left the Moontrekkers. But they carried on. As it turned out, they the whole thing fell through anyway. But they did go on the road. They were back in Vince Eager for a while. Don't you if you remember that name? Yeah. And they went on touring around the country with him.
And you must have felt them pretty bad about that.
Well, yeah, I was well choked, obviously, you know. But then I walked straight into another local band that used around our way called the Aristocats.
Right.
And they had a rhythm guitarist was leaving at the time. I was pretty friendly with them. Used to knock about with them a bit, the drummer and everything. And they said, well, why don't you come and join us as rhythm guitarist?
So you started off on acoustic, switched to bass, and now you're on rhythm.
Yeah, then I went to
so
rhythm.
You're pretty adaptable as a guitarist.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm not exactly a lead guitarist, let's put it like that. I've never tried that yet. But no, I played rhythm with them for a while. Then in the end, I went back to playing bass again because the bass player left. And in the meantime, we got a sax player who played keyboards as well.
Right.
So we said, well, let's drop the rhythm and you go back to playing bass. So, so I went round in a full circle, really.
Let's have one more Moontrekkers track, because they don't get played very often on the radio. And I thought we need a landmark radio programme where they get 3 songs in an hour. just for a
it's never been done before.
Exactly. So let's make a bit of history. I've got Grandfather Clock here.
Yeah, well, that was never never released. That was meant to be a demo. At the time, we were using Watkins amps. We just bought these new Watkins amps, and we were sort of. They asked us if we do a demo.
Were they the amps that used to say WEM on the front? WEM.
They did in later days. Right. I don't think they did at that time.
Okay.
And they asked us to do a demo with some bass in it and things like that to demonstrate their amplifiers.
Were they good amps?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
you weren't sticking knitting needles through the cones and
no, try not to do things like that to them. And so Joe agreed to do it, and we recorded that, and that was it. I don't know whatever happened to it after that, but it was never intended for release. But obviously, it's been found amongst all the.
We have a very good friend on the programme. His name is Roger Dobson.
Yeah,
he is one of the Joe Meek discography experts.
Oh, right.
And he's got access to all sorts of stuff, and he compiled this CD called Diamond Joe. A treasure chest of rarities and collectibles from the sound of Meeksville.
Ah, right.
And there it is, Grandfather Clock, the Moontrekkers. Have you got a copy of this?
No, I haven't.
Really?
Funny enough.
Oh, well, enjoy listening to mine.
All right.
the Moontrekkers, and we'll be talking more with Pete Johnson. Pete Johnson is here, guitarist extraordinaire.
Still here.
So why did you pick Booker T? What's special?
Well, it's just a great record, isn't it? It's got a great mood to it. You know, that sound, the Hammond organ. You can't beat the sound of a Hammond organ.
And what about the
of
guitar
course,
work?
Yeah, Steve Cropper, of course.
Master.
Of course, they were the main Stay Behind Stax label.
Yes.
Used to play on most of the records, I believe, and of course with the Memphis Horns. And, you know, they're just a great, and I love the Stax sound. I just don't think, you know, you can always tell a Stax record.
You certainly can.
Yeah.
What a
Otis
wonderful
Redding.
sound. And the backing is of such consistent
Yeah.
quality.
I went and saw the
Steve
Stax
Cropper
tour
some
when they
years
came
ago.
over here.
That would have been, what, 65?
About 67, I think,
Yeah.
66.
Otis Redding was on.
Yeah,
there.
Otis Redding. There was, say, Booker T and the MGs, and Sam and Dave, Eddie Floyd.
You've seen them all.
It was
haven't you?
brilliant. Yeah, it was at the Hammersmith Odeon. That was.
Did you carry on working throughout this period, or did when you went into the band after the Moontrekkers, did you finally?
No,
chuck
I was
the
still.
day job
No, I
in?
was. No, I never chucked the day job in.
You never did.
No, I never did chuck the day job in. No, weren't making that much money.
So I guess
was
actually
fun.
in
It
some
was
way you
fun
could
as
have
much as
more
any-
fun if you weren't because you weren't dependent on paying the bills.
Well, yeah, this is it. I mean, you know, you'd have to do a hell of a lot of gigs to
Mm.
make it pay, because unless you're a sort of top name, you know, and you demand big money.
So in the mid '60s, what was a typical gig for you?
Oh, we could do a lot of Mecca ballrooms,
Mm-hmm.
top rank ballrooms, clubs. We used to do an all-nighter at the club in Tottenham called the Club Norwich,
Right.
which was on
all
the corner of
night.
Tottenham. Yeah, they were all-nighters. We used to do 2 gigs in a night. We go and do an early evening gig
Right.
somewhere locally, pack up down there midnight, start playing till 6 in the morning.
And were you playing mostly covers or some of your own material?
Mostly covers, because people, you know, those days you couldn't get away, unless you were well known, you couldn't really get away with playing a lot of your own stuff. We did write a lot of our own stuff, and did record quite a bit of it as well, you know, on demos and things, but unfortunately none of it ever got put out.
And did I understand correctly? Across most of your career, you've mainly focused on playing bass.
Yes.
So if you had to pick favourite bass players, then who would they be, Pete?
Oh, Chaz Hodges, he's a good bass player.
He might be listening, you know.
Yes.
So there you are.
Well, Chaz,
He'll
I think
give you
you're a
the
great bass
backhand
player,
at
yeah.
He was pretty good, wasn't he?
Guy out the who was the, I can't think of his name now, the Who.
Oh, John Entwistle.
John
The
Entwistle,
Ox.
he was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was a brilliant bass player, yeah. Yeah, people like that.
And what about people like Carol Kay, who was in the Wrecking Crew that played on all the Phil Spector records? Were there any American players who caught your ear?
Honestly, never heard of her, to be honest. But
Oh, really?
no.
Well,
Well, she was the bass player. No, she probably
has.
hasn't. No, very few people have.
So there you are in North London,
Yeah.
and now you're living in Hertford. So
Well,
how did you make that journey?
Oh, when I got married, we moved out to Hoddesdon.
Hoddesdon, right?
Yeah, bought a house out there when they were building a 100-acre estate there. I don't know if you remember that.
Where's that? The 100 acres.
It's on Stansted Road.
Oh, okay. Is that out on the north side of Hoddesdon towards the sort of Rye House?
It's,
and,
no, that's south of. Yeah,
Yeah.
Rye House. Yeah, of course
Yeah,
it's north.
Stansted
Yeah, north
Abbots,
of
that
Hoddesdon.
part,
Yeah, 'cause-
yeah.
yeah, that's it. Yes, and we bought a house there, and then moved on from there. Moved to Dane Inn for a while, and Ware, and then ended up in Hertford.
Right. And it's okay, is it?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love Hertford. Yeah.
And are you still gigging?
No, not really. We do the odd get together. I mean, we did one a little while ago, over in Malden in Essex, but it was a bit of a last minute put together job. We
Right.
we didn't have Peter Knight couldn't make it, so we had a standing keyboard player and everything. So that was the sort of last one we've done. But
Right. And
no,
I hear
I'll get together with the other guys sometimes. I say I'm going off to Australia next year because the singer we used to sing with us, he lives out there now. We go out there and been out there a couple of times.
That's a
and
good excuse to
we,
go to
when we get
Australia,
together, have a
isn't
little bash, you know, it's just between us all,
it?
like,
Yeah,
you know.
what? Put a steak on the barbie.
That's it. Sling a steak on the barbie.
You're making me jealous. And the snow is falling outside.
Oh no.
Now, you've chosen a track from a Travelling Wilburys. Is this a particular...
Well, I
favourite?
think they're great. I mean, they've got to be one of the greatest super groups ever, haven't they? I mean, what a lineup, you know.
Fantastic.
Bob
yeah.
Dylan, you know, George Harrison, goes on, doesn't it? And Jeff Lynne. you know, it's just terrific. And Roy Orbison, you know, what a lineup. So I thought, got to put something a bit more modern in.
Beat up and battered around, been sent up and I've been shut down.
Handle with Care, chosen by our special guest here on the Jukebox Drive-In. Pete Johnson is with us. He was just showing us some of her memorabilia. I mean, that card with Rod Stewarty as your lead singer, there's a piece of history. That's probably pretty collectible now. I imagine a lot of Rod Stewart fans would like to own that. You must look after that memorabilia. Pete, we're running out of time. I hope you have a terrific visit to Australia next year. And
Thank you.
Happy reunion on the guitar again with all your mates. And I'm looking forward next time I see you in the Millstream buying you a pint.
Oh, that'd be very acceptable.
Whatever.
I never say no to a pint.
Good. Well, that's all right then. And thanks ever so much, especially on such a grisly night, of making the way up to HertBeat FM to share some of your wonderful memories of what was a glorious musical time.
It's been a pleasure.
Pete Johnson, thank you very much indeed.
Goodbye.
And there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Jukebox Drive-In rounded off for another week. Big thank you once again to our special guest, Pete Johnson.